I'm Claire Donovan, 35, standing quietly near the back of my sister Emily's engagement party in a cozy Brooklyn loft. Emily's laughing and flaunting her new ring like she's the queen of the room. Nobody here knows I'm the youngest judge appointed in New York City in over 4 decades. To my family, I'm just Claire the office clerk. And Emily never misses an opportunity to remind everyone. Just minutes ago, she sneered at my career in front of her fiancé, Marcus, a high-powered corporate lawyer. What she doesn't realize is that Marcus and I have crossed paths before, in my courtroom. The hush that fell after my sharp reply flipped the entire room upside down. Before I dive into what happened next, tell me where you're watching from. Leave a comment and subscribe if you've ever been belittled by a family member. What came after that moment changed everything. Growing up with Emily felt like living in her shadow. She's 6 years older and always the shining star in our family. From childhood, I learned that the Donovans celebrated Emily's victories loudly, while my successes barely got a nod. When Emily landed the lead role in the school musical, my mom told anyone who'd listen. When Emily was accepted into prestigious universities with scholarships, my dad's chest swelled with pride. Don't get me wrong, I love my parents, Mark and Sandra Donovan. They worked hard to give us a comfortable middle-class life in Brooklyn's brownstone neighborhood, but they never quite figured out how to give equal applause to both daughters. Emily was bold and outspoken. I was quiet and thoughtful. In our house, the loudest voice always got the spotlight. I still remember bringing home straight A's in middle school, beaming with pride. That very night, Emily had been chosen for the city's debate championship. Guess which story ruled the dinner table? Claire's the easygoing one, Mom would say to friends. Emily needs more attention. As if being quieter meant my efforts were invisible. By high school, I grew a tough skin and found pride in my own path instead of waiting for approval. I joined mock trial and discovered my passion for justice. When I told my parents I wanted to go to law school, their reaction was lukewarm. It's expensive and tough to succeed, Dad warned. No such worries came up when Emily chose a master's in marketing. That pattern stayed with us into adulthood, until the night everything changed. Emily loved sharing grand, often exaggerated tales of her career victories, while I quietly kept my successes to myself. It wasn't that I wasn't proud, because I was, but years of having my achievements brushed aside taught me it was easier to stay under the radar. The administrative assistant misunderstanding happened 3 years ago. I had just passed the bar exam and was working as a clerk for Judge Thompson, learning the ropes before applying to the district attorney's office. At a family Thanksgiving, when asked about my job, I said I assisted Judge Thompson. My Aunt Sandra immediately assumed I meant I was just a secretary. Before I could correct her, Emily jumped in with a sly smile. "Oh, right. Claire's just answering phones and fetching coffee for some judge," she said, eyes cold. The comment stung, but something inside me held back from correcting her. Maybe it was the fatigue of years spent having my accomplishments minimized, or a stubborn part of me curious how long it would take for anyone to ask about my real job. So I said nothing, and the misunderstanding stuck. What they didn't know was that I had far surpassed their expectations. After my clerkship, I spent 5 years as a prosecutor with nearly a perfect conviction record. Known for being firm yet fair, I earned respect from colleagues citywide. When Judge Thompson retired, he personally recommended me as his successor. At 30, I became the youngest magistrate appointed in New York in over 40 years. Legal journals reported it, but at family gatherings, the topic never came up. For 2 years, I kept my position secret, telling myself it didn't matter what they thought. But deep down, the little girl craving her parents' approval still lingered. I often imagined revealing the truth during a family dinner, picturing their stunned faces. But I never did, until Emily's engagement party. The party was everything I expected, extravagant, polished, and designed to flaunt her flawless life. Our parents had transformed their Brooklyn brownstone's backyard into a fairy tale scene with string lights, flowers, and a professional caterer. A huge banner hung above the entrance. "Congrats, Emily and Marcus." I arrived early to help Mom with last-minute details, partly out of obligation and partly to avoid Emily's grand entrance. "Oh, Claire, you're here," Mom said without really looking up. arranging centerpieces. Can you set up the drinks? Emily wants everything perfect before Marcus's parents arrive. Dad was busy stringing more lights in the trees. Emily thinks the place will look magical at dusk, he said, balancing on a ladder. I nodded, placing crystal glasses and champagne bottles carefully on the table, bracing myself for the night ahead. This was typical. Even at an event meant to celebrate her, Emily made sure she controlled every detail. As guests began trickling in, I slipped away to a quiet corner near the garden, nursing a glass of champagne. Relatives I hadn't seen in months greeted me with the usual scripted questions. Still working as an office clerk, Claire? Uncle Frank asked, giving my shoulder a friendly pat. Nothing wrong with honest work. Administrative assistant, I corrected automatically. The polite fib had become second nature. Aunt Patricia gave my arm a sympathetic squeeze. Don't worry, dear. Not everyone can have Emily's ambition. You'll find your way someday. I was 35, with a career many would envy, yet these family gatherings always made me feel like a disappointed teenager. At exactly 6 p.m., a sleek black Tesla rolled up the driveway. Emily had arrived with Marcus, her fiancé. I hadn't met him before, but I knew of him, a well-respected defense attorney who had argued cases in my courtroom, though we'd never formally met. I always wore my judicial robe and pulled back hair in court, so I doubted Marcus would recognize me in a cocktail dress with my hair down. Emily made her entrance like royalty, stunning in an elegant designer gown. Her diamond engagement ring flashed as she waved her hand dramatically with every sentence. Marcus walked beside her, tall and composed in a tailored suit, smiling politely as Emily introduced him around. He seemed pleasant, if more reserved than my sister's exuberance. Mom? Dad? Emily called, hugging our parents warmly. Everything looks perfect, though those flowers would look better on the center table. Without waiting for a reply, she turned to the crowd. Everyone, this is my fiancé, Marcus Reynolds, youngest partner at Carter, Blake, and Associates. Marcus flushed slightly at the introduction. It's a pleasure to meet the family, he said warmly. Emily talks about you all often. Emily continued showing him off, highlighting his achievements. Marcus just won a huge case against Newmark Pharmaceuticals, she told our grandparents. The partners are considering him for their executive board. I sipped my champagne, content to observe quietly from the sidelines. My cousin Jessica slid up next to me, the only family member who knew the full truth about my career. She'd been my confidant since childhood and had attended my swearing-in ceremony. How's Her Honor doing tonight? She whispered with a smile. I returned her smile, enjoying the show. How long before Emily drops Marcus's Harvard Law degree? Jessica smirked. She already mentioned it 3 times. I clinked my glass with hers. You know, I could end this charade anytime. And steal Emily's thunder at her engagement party? I'm not that cruel. I smiled softly. It's not cruelty, Claire. It's honesty and self-respect, Jessica whispered back. Before I could reply, Emily spotted us and glided over, Marcus trailing behind. Jessica, have you met Marcus? She asked, not waiting for an answer. And of course you remember my little sister, Claire, Emily added with a practiced smile. Marcus extended his hand toward me with genuine warmth. Emily's told me a lot about you. It's nice to finally meet you, I said as we shook hands. For a split second, I caught a flicker in his eyes. A narrowing, a hesitation, as if he was trying to place me. My heart quickened, but Marcus's face smoothed over, and the moment passed. Claire works as an administrative assistant for some law firm downtown, Emily said dismissively. Marcus, I'm sure there are more prestigious places she could be applying to, right? Marcus glanced at me apologetically. I'm sure Claire is quite capable of managing her own career, he replied politely. Throughout the evening, Emily continued weaving similar remarks, subtle barbs meant to assert her dominance. Every time she mentioned my administrative role, I noticed Marcus's puzzled looks, as if trying to connect the dots. The tension mounted as dinner time approached, and I wondered if I could survive the night without the past crashing into the present. Dinner was served at a long table on my parents' backyard patio, fairy lights casting a warm glow against the night sky. I sat between my grandmother and a distant cousin, while Emily and Marcus took the places of honor beside Mom and Dad. The catered meal was flawless. Emily had ensured that, and the conversation flowed along with the expensive wine. I was beginning to relax when Dad stood to make a toast. "To Emily and Marcus," he began, raising his glass. "Emily, you've always reached for the stars, and now you've found someone just as ambitious to share your life with. We couldn't be prouder." Emily beamed, soaking in the praise I had rarely heard directed at me. After a few more toasts, including one from Marcus to his beautiful, passionate fiancé, Emily stood and captured everyone's attention. "Marcus has some exciting news, but he's too modest to share," she announced. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, but spoke up. "It's not a big deal, but I recently won a major win against Newmark Pharmaceuticals. It was a team effort, really?" "He's being modest," Emily interrupted. "It was a 7-figure settlement, and Marcus was lead counsel. The partners are already talking about fast-tracking him to senior partner." As impressed murmurs rippled around the table, I immediately recognized the case Marcus was talking about. It had first been assigned to another judge, but was transferred to my courtroom after Judge Brennan took a sudden leave. I remembered Marcus's sharp, skillful arguments and professional demeanor. He had earned that victory, fair and square. Emily, fueled by attention, and perhaps one too many glasses of champagne, pressed on. "Marcus works with real judges and important clients every day. It's meaningful work." Her eyes locked on mine across the table, and I saw the familiar gleam. Here it comes, I thought. "Not everyone can handle the pressure of a high-profile career," she said with a sly smile. "Some people are better suited for supporting roles. Right, Claire?" The attention awkwardly shifted to me. "Claire's been an administrative assistant for how long now, sweetie?" 3 years, I answered quietly. 3 years. Emily repeated it like a judge passing sentence. 3 years. "Marcus, did you know my sister works at a law office? Maybe you've crossed paths?" Emily asked. Marcus looked at me curiously. "Which firm are you with, Claire?" Before I could answer, Emily laughed. "Oh, Claire doesn't work at a firm. She's at the county courthouse, answering phones or filing papers or something. What exactly do you do all day, Claire?" A heavy silence fell over the table. Mom stared down at her plate, and Dad suddenly took great interest in refilling his wine glass. "Administrative support," I said evenly, the lie bitter on my tongue. Emily's smile widened triumphantly. "See? Some of us are meant for greatness, and others for making coffee. But we need both types, right?" A few relatives chuckled awkwardly. Uncle Frank gave me a sympathetic glance. Grandma patted my hand under the table. Marcus leaned in slightly, his voice quiet but firm. "But," Emily cut him off, mistaking his hesitation for embarrassment on her behalf. "It's fine. Claire doesn't mind. She's always been the quiet one, happy to blend into the background. We can't all be overachievers." Raising her glass, Emily toasted, "To knowing your place in the world." The toast hung in the air. Few joined in. My cheeks burned, not with shame over my supposed role, but with anger at Emily's cruelty and my parents' silent acceptance. Marcus was looking at me intently now, brow furrowed. "Donovan, Claire Donovan, from the county courthouse." Emily beamed, pleased he was buying into her story. "That's right, honey. Not everyone can argue those big cases like you," Marcus said, shaking his head slightly, still staring at me. "No, that's not—" Suddenly, his eyes widened. "You're not administrative support. You're—" The moment stretched, suspended in time as Marcus's memory clicked into place. "Claire," he said carefully, "what exactly is your position at the courthouse?" Every eye at the table swung toward me. Emily's smile froze, confusion flickering behind her eyes. My parents looked stunned, unsure how to respond to the unexpected turn. For 3 years, I had swallowed my pride, letting Emily's dismissive remarks slide by without correction. But now, looking at Emily's smug face, something inside me shattered, free. I drew a deep breath and met Marcus's gaze squarely. "Judge." The single word hung in the silence, sending ripples of disbelief around the table. "What?" Emily asked, her smile faltering but stubbornly clinging on. "Don't be ridiculous." Marcus's face went stone cold, recognition dawning fully. "Judge Donovan," he said quietly. "Northern District Court. Under the table, Grandma's hand tightened around mine. "That's impossible," Emily said, looking from Marcus to me, her voice rising. "Claire's just an administrative assistant. She's told us that for years." "I never actually said that," I replied, voice steadier than I felt. 3 years ago, I mentioned I was assisting Judge Thompson. Everyone assumed that meant assistant. I never corrected the misunderstanding. I've appeared in her courtroom at least 6 times. Marcus nodded slowly, still processing. "Bradford Pharmaceuticals? That was your courtroom." Dad sank into his chair, the wine glass thudding against the table. "You're a judge? An actual judge?" Mom's face had gone pale. "But that's not— You would have told us something like that," she stammered. Around the table, relatives exchanged shocked glances, whispering behind cupped hands, reevaluating every past interaction with me. "The youngest judge appointed to the district court in over 40 years, Marcus added, respect threading his voice. "I remember when the announcement was made. I just never connected. Judge Donovan was Emily's sister." Emily's face twisted, shock giving way to disbelief, then anger. "This is absurd. You're making this up for attention." "I'm not," I said quietly. "She's not," Marcus confirmed firmly. "Emily, your sister presided over the Bradford case. She's highly respected in the legal community." "Why wouldn't you tell us?" Mom asked quietly, her voice small and hurt. I glanced around the table, seeing a mix of confusion, admiration, and embarrassment on my family's faces. Would it have mattered? Emily was always the star, the center of attention. "My achievements never seemed to register," I said softly. "That's not true," Dad protested weakly, but I wasn't convinced. "Is it?" I challenged. "When I got into law school, you warned me about student loan debt. When I passed the bar, it was mentioned once at Sunday dinner, and never again. I stopped sharing my successes because no one seemed to care." Aunt Patricia covered her mouth in shock. "Oh dear. All those times I asked if you'd found a better job yet." Uncle Frank looked mortified. "I told the judge of the Northern District Court there's no shame in honest work." Under different circumstances, their reactions might have been laughable. Emily abruptly stood, her chair scraping loudly against the stone patio. "This is my engagement party," she hissed. "And you're trying to steal the spotlight as usual." "As usual?" I repeated incredulously. "When have I ever stolen your spotlight? You're lying." Emily's voice wavered with doubt. "Marcus, tell them she's lying." Marcus stood slowly and placed a gentle hand on Emily's arm. "Emily, she's not lying. Judge Donovan is well known in legal circles. I've argued motions in her courtroom numerous times." Emily jerked away, her face twisting with betrayal. "You knew? You knew and didn't tell me?" "I didn't make the connection until just now," Marcus explained. "Judge Donovan on the bench looks different." He gestured vaguely at my casual dress and loose hair. "Black robe, hair pulled back," I added. "Different context," Marcus agreed. Mom had begun quietly crying, and Dad patted her hand mechanically, staring at me as if seeing a stranger. Cousin Jessica, who had watched everything unfold with barely hidden satisfaction, finally spoke. I went to her swearing-in ceremony. It was in all the legal journals, the youngest judge appointed to the Northern District in 5 decades. "It was a big deal." "And none of you thought to mention this to us?" Dad asked, looking around accusingly. "She asked me not to," Jessica replied simply. Emily still stood, her face a storm of emotions. "This is just perfect. Even at my engagement party, you found a way to make it about you." "Emily," Marcus said quietly, "that's not fair." "Fair," she laughed bitterly. "What's not fair is discovering my fiancé apparently knows my sister better than I do. What's not fair is having my special night ruined by some twisted revelation." With that, she tossed her napkin on the table and stormed inside. After an awkward pause, Marcus murmured an apology and followed her. The remaining guests sat in uncomfortable silence. Grandma squeezed my hand again and whispered, "I always knew you were destined for greatness, dear." My parents looked shell-shocked. Mom's makeup was streaked from tears. "Why wouldn't you tell us something so important?" Mom asked again. Before I could answer, Uncle Frank cleared his throat. I think that's fairly obvious, Elizabeth. You and Robert never really paid much attention to Claire's accomplishments. That's not true, Dad protested weakly, his voice lacking conviction. The party effectively ended after that. Relatives made awkward excuses to leave, many stopping to congratulate me with a mix of embarrassment and newfound respect. My parents remained seated, dazed and uncertain. As the guests trickled away, Marcus returned to the patio alone. Emily's upset, he said unnecessarily. She's asked me to take her home. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. For what it's worth, he added quietly, you're an excellent judge. Fair and thorough. The Bradford ruling was spot on. Thank you, I managed. He hesitated, then said, I'll talk to her when she calms down. This is a lot for her to process. After Marcus left, I found myself alone with my parents for the first time since the revelation. We sat in silence as the catering staff quietly cleaned up. I don't understand, Mom finally said. We've always been proud of you, Claire. Have you? I asked softly, because it never felt that way. We need time to process this, Dad said, running a hand through his thinning hair. It's a lot to take in. I nodded, suddenly exhausted. I should go, I said. Neither of them protested as I gathered my things and left, the weight of 3 years of hidden truth and a lifetime of being overlooked heavy on my shoulders. Driving home to my empty apartment, I wondered, had I finally broken free or just created a deeper rift in my fractured family? The morning after Emily's engagement party, I woke to 17 missed calls and 32 texts. Most were from extended family, apologetic, curious. 3 were from my parents, asking me to call. None from Emily. I spent the day suspended between relief that my secret was out and anxiety over what came next. Part of me wanted to call Emily, but another part, the part that had endured years of her subtle put-downs, felt she needed to make the first move. Around noon the next day, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Marcus standing awkwardly in my modest Brooklyn hallway. Marcus, I said, surprised. Is Emily with you? No, he replied quietly. She doesn't know I'm here. May I come in? He asked. I hesitated, but stepped aside. My apartment was modest but comfortable. Law books neatly lined the shelves and a few landscape paintings brightened the walls. Nice place, Marcus commented, glancing around. Thank you. Coffee? I offered. He nodded, and as I moved to the kitchen, I felt grateful for the brief distraction. When I returned with 2 mugs, Marcus was examining my law school diploma hanging on the wall. Columbia, he noted, impressed. Emily went to NYU. I said it automatically, before catching myself. The habit of deflecting praise by redirecting to Emily was deeply ingrained. Marcus took the coffee gratefully. About last night, I wanted to apologize. You have nothing to apologize for, I said firmly. I feel like I do, he replied. I should have recognized you sooner. I shrugged. On the bench, I look different, more severe. It's not just that, he said, sipping his coffee. Emily described you so differently that I never made the connection. She talked about her little sister who couldn't find her place, who needed protecting. Not exactly how I described Judge Donovan. I laughed without humor. Emily always needs to see me as less successful than her. It's how she defines herself. By comparison. Marcus nodded slowly. I'm starting to realize that. He paused. She was up all night, alternating between crying and raging about how you humiliated her. I never intended to humiliate her, I said quietly. I just couldn't take it anymore. I know, he said. For what it's worth, I think you showed remarkable restraint. Most people wouldn't have stayed silent about such an achievement for so long. We sat quietly for a moment before he continued. There's something else you should know. Emily hasn't been entirely truthful about her career. My eyebrows lifted. What do you mean? She's not a marketing executive, at least not in the way she's described. She works in marketing, but only as a mid-level account manager, not a director. She hasn't led any major campaigns. The promotion she bragged about at Christmas? It never happened. The revelation stunned me. If you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated by those closest to you, don't miss what happens next. Subscribe now and stay with me as Claire's journey unfolds in ways you won't expect. Emily had always seemed so confident about her accomplishments, so quick to share her successes. Why would she lie about that? I asked Marcus, though I already suspected the answer. I think she feels tremendous pressure to be exceptional, Marcus said carefully. She talks about your parents' expectations, about needing to be the successful daughter. Our parents put that pressure on her, not me, I replied, feeling a twinge of sympathy for Emily despite everything. Did they? Marcus asked gently. Or did Emily put that pressure on herself? From what I've observed, your parents seem equally proud of both of you, or they would be if they knew the truth. His words gave me pause. Had I misread the family dynamic all these years? Or had Emily and I both been trapped in roles we'd created for ourselves? What happens now? I asked. Marcus sighed. I'm not sure. I care about Emily deeply, but last night revealed some concerning things about our relationship that I need to think about. You're not reconsidering the engagement? I asked, alarmed. I don't know, he admitted. I love her, but the person I saw last night, the way she spoke to you, her reaction to the truth, that's not the woman I want to build a life with. She was shocked and embarrassed, I said, defending Emily, surprising myself. People say things they don't mean in those moments. Perhaps, he conceded, but it revealed a pattern I can't ignore. The competitiveness, the need to put others down to feel superior. Those aren't qualities that disappear overnight. We talked for another hour about Emily, my career, and the tangled family dynamics. As he was leaving, Marcus turned at the door. For what it's worth, Judge Donovan, I think you're exceptional. Not just because of your position or achievements, but because despite years of being overlooked, you've remained compassionate. Even now, you're defending the sister who never defended you. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment, his words echoing in my mind. Despite everything, I loved Emily. Beneath her competitive nature and need for validation, I knew there was a vulnerable person, one who had perhaps suffered in ways I hadn't recognized. Later that afternoon, while reviewing case files for Monday, my doorbell rang again. This time, it was Emily. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Without makeup or designer clothes, she looked younger, more like the sister I'd grown up with. "Can I come in?" she asked, voice hoarse. I stepped aside and closed the door behind her. "Marcus came to see you," she said, not as a question. "Yes, he told me. He also thinks we should postpone the wedding." I winced. "Emily, I'm sorry." "Are you?" Emily asked, but without her usual sharp edge. Her voice was quietly curious. "Yes," I said firmly. "I never wanted to hurt you or ruin your engagement," she said, moving toward the window and gazing down at the city below. "Why didn't you tell us? About being a judge?" It was the question I'd been asked repeatedly since last night. But coming from Emily, it felt different. More sincere, more raw. "Would it have mattered?" I asked softly. She turned to face me, and I was surprised to see tears welling in her eyes. "Of course it would have mattered. You're my sister." "A sister you spent years belittling and dismissing," I reminded her gently. "I never—" she started, then stopped herself. "I didn't see it that way," she finally said. "How did you see it?" She sank onto my couch, suddenly looking drained. "I don't know," I admitted. "I always felt like I had to be exceptional, like anything less would be failing. Mom and Dad never put that pressure on us," I added, echoing what Marcus had said. "Didn't they?" Emily asked. "Maybe not directly, but it was always there. The expectations, the subtle disappointments when we didn't measure up." I sat beside her but kept a careful distance. "I think we interpreted things very differently," I said. "Maybe they treated us differently." "You were always the smart one, the responsible one," she said softly. "I was the pretty one, the social one. I felt like if I didn't excel at something, I had no value." Her words surprised me. Emily insecure? It seemed impossible, yet the vulnerability in her voice was unmistakable. "So you lied about your job?" I asked gently. "Marcus told me," she flinched. "He had no right." Probably not, I agreed. But I understand why you did it. Do you? She asked bitterly. Miss Perfect Judge who never needed validation? I teased lightly. I needed validation, she admitted. I just stopped expecting it from family. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken wounds. Finally, Emily whispered, I'm not sure who I am if I'm not the successful one. You don't have to be exceptional to be worthy, I said. She laughed without humor. Says the youngest judge in 50 years. That's what I do, not who I am, I replied. Emily looked at me long and said, When did you get so wise? Probably around the same time you started pretending to be a marketing director, I teased, allowing a small smile. To my surprise, Emily laughed. A genuine, warm laugh I hadn't heard from her in years. For a brief moment, we were just sisters again, free from the competition and resentment that had shadowed our relationship for so long. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted softly. With Marcus? With me? With everyone? I asked. Maybe start with honesty, I suggested. It's worked out okay for me so far. She nodded slowly, then stood to leave. At the door, she paused and turned back. I'm proud of you, Claire. I always have been. That's part of the problem, I whispered. After she left, I sat alone again, wondering if this was the start of healing or just a temporary truce in a lifetime of sibling rivalry. Either way, the truth was finally out. There was no going back to the way things had been. The week after Emily's engagement party was a time of uneasy transition for the Donovan family. My parents called daily, alternating between apologies for failing to recognize my accomplishments and hurt questions about why I'd kept such important news from them. Extended family members sent belated congratulations, many with awkward admissions that they'd misunderstood my career all along. Emily and I kept our distance, mostly communicating through short text messages. She was trying to salvage her relationship with Marcus, who remained unsettled by what he'd witnessed that night. 10 days later, my mother called to invite me to Sunday dinner, a weekly tradition I'd been avoiding for months with work excuses. Everyone will be there, she said, voice tinged with pleading. Emily, Marcus, your father and I, we need to talk as a family. I agreed reluctantly, knowing the conversation was necessary, but dreading it nonetheless. Sunday arrived with a sense of foreboding. I dressed carefully in casual yet professional attire, a subtle statement of who I really was. As I drove to my parents' brownstone, I rehearsed what I wanted to say and the boundaries I needed to set. Dad answered the door and pulled me into an awkward embrace. Claire, he said, voice thick with emotion, good to see you. The house smelled like Mom's pot roast, her signature Sunday dinner. In the living room, Mom was arranging flowers while Emily sat stiffly on the couch. Marcus stood by the fireplace, looking uneasy but resolute. Claire's here, Dad announced unnecessarily. Mom rushed over and hugged me tightly. We're so glad you came, she whispered. Emily offered a tight smile, but didn't stand. Marcus nodded respectfully. Judge Donovan. Marcus, please, Mom interjected quickly. We're not in court. It's just Claire, Dad said quietly as Marcus stepped back. Dinner was tense, the conversation limited to safe topics. Weather, neighborhood news. Only after Mom served her apple pie did Dad clear his throat significantly. I think it's time we cleared the air, he said, looking around the table. Mom nodded in agreement. We've all had time to process what happened at the engagement party. I think we need to talk honestly about why things came to that point. Emily set down her fork sharply. Fine. Let's talk about how Claire deliberately humiliated me at my own engagement party. Emily? Marcus warned softly. No, she continued, eyes flashing. Let's be honest. You let everyone believe you were some struggling administrative assistant for years, then dramatically revealed you're actually a judge at my engagement party. If that wasn't calculated to steal my spotlight, I don't know what is. That's not what happened, I said evenly. I never planned to reveal anything that night. You pushed and pushed, mocking my supposed career until I couldn't take it anymore. Girls, Mom interrupted, this isn't productive. Actually, Elizabeth, Dad said, surprising everyone by using Mom's first name. I think they need to have this out. We all do. Emily glared at me. You've always been jealous of me. I laughed incredulously. Jealous? Emily, you're the one who spent years putting me down to make yourself feel better. Because you were always the smart one, the perfect one. Why can't you be more like Claire? Claire never gives us trouble. Claire always gets straight A's. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up in your shadow? Her words stunned me into silence. Mom and Dad looked equally shocked. We never said those things, Mom protested weakly. Maybe not in those exact words, Emily snapped, but the message was clear. Claire was the good daughter. I was the problem. That's not true, Dad insisted. We've always been proud of both of you. Really? I asked, finding my voice. Because from where I stood, Emily was always the star. My achievements were just afterthoughts. That's ridiculous, Emily scoffed. They threw a party when you got into Columbia, I reminded her. When I got into NYU, it was just, that's nice, dear, she said. That was a dinner, not a party, I corrected. And only after Aunt Susan suggested it. When you got that marketing internship, Dad called everyone we knew. Mom and Dad exchanged bewildered looks between us. We thought we were being fair, Mom said softly. Well, you weren't, Emily and I said in unison, then stared at each other in surprise. Marcus, who had been quiet throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. It seems to me you both felt overlooked, just in different ways. His simple observation cut through the tension, making us all pause. Is that possible? Dad asked, genuinely confused. That we somehow made both of you feel like the less favored child? Emily and I exchanged glances. For the first time, I considered that my perception of our family dynamic might not be entirely accurate, or at least that there could be more than one valid perspective. I think, Marcus said carefully, families develop patterns that aren't always visible from within. From an outsider's view, it seems both Emily and Claire have created narratives about their place in the family that may not fully reflect reality. That's easy for you to say, Emily retorted. You didn't live it. No, Marcus agreed. But I've watched you compare yourself to everyone since the day we met. Not just Claire, but friends, colleagues, strangers. Your self-worth seems tied to being better than others. I've never understood why. Emily's face flushed. That's not fair, she said. Isn't it? Marcus challenged gently. You lied about your job title, your responsibilities, even that promotion that never happened. Why, if not to seem more successful than you felt? My parents turned to Emily, confused. What promotion? Mom asked. Emily's eyes filled with tears. The director position I told you about at Christmas. I didn't get it. I'm still just an account manager. Dad reached for her hand. Emily, why didn't you tell us? Because I couldn't bear to disappoint you, she cried. Not when Claire was so perfect. But I thought you were the favorite, I said, genuinely puzzled. And I thought I was, she replied, equally perplexed. We stared at each other across the table, realizing perhaps we'd both been wrong, or both right, in different ways. I think, Mom said hesitantly, that your father and I made mistakes in how we raised you. Not intentionally, but the impact is clear. Dad nodded solemnly. We never meant to make either of you feel less valued. We love you both so much and are proud of you both. Judge or account manager? It doesn't matter. It does matter, Emily insisted. Claire's achieved something extraordinary. I'm ordinary. There's nothing wrong with ordinary, Marcus said quietly. Most of life is ordinary. It's how we live it that matters. Emily looked at Marcus, vulnerability raw on her face. Can you be happy with ordinary? I fell in love with Emily Donovan, not her job title, Marcus replied simply. The conversation stretched for hours, painful truths surfacing alongside genuine attempts at understanding. My parents acknowledged their part in creating an environment steeped in comparison, even if unintentional. Emily admitted to her insecurities and the lies they'd pushed her to tell. I confessed how I'd wielded my secret success as a kind of weapon, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it. None of us emerged blameless, but by the end of the night, something had shifted. The carefully constructed narratives we'd all been living by crumbled, making room for something more authentic. As Marcus and Emily prepared to leave, my sister pulled me aside. "I'm sorry," she said simply, "for a lot of things." "Me too," I replied. "I don't know how to be your sister without competing," she admitted. "Maybe we can figure it out together," I suggested. She nodded, a tentative smile breaking through. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Decades of misunderstandings couldn't vanish in a single evening, but it was a beginning. Driving home that night, I felt lighter than I had in years, the weight of secrecy and resentment finally lifting. 3 months after the engagement party, much had changed in the Donovan family. Emily and Marcus postponed their wedding, opting for a longer engagement, while Emily worked with a therapist to address her insecurities and competitive tendencies. My parents became almost comically cautious in how they expressed pride in either daughter, carefully maintaining a visible balance. As for me, I stepped fully into my identity, no longer hiding my position or accomplishments. My courtroom even welcomed a few family visitors. Dad sitting proudly in the back during a routine hearing, Mom attending the conclusion of a high-profile case that made local news. The most significant change was in my relationship with Emily. We began meeting for coffee every other Sunday, awkward conversations slowly giving way to genuine connection. We weren't best friends. Too much history lay between us. But we were building something new, something healthier. Today was one such Sunday. I arrived at our usual cafe to find Emily already seated, 2 steaming mugs on the table. "Court roast for the court lady," she said, pushing my coffee toward me with a smile that held just a hint of its old edge. "Thanks," I replied, settling into the chair across from her. "How's work?" A shadow crossed her face, then lifted. "Actually, good. I told my boss I want to earn that director position legitimately. He's created a development plan with me." "That's great, Emily," I said warmly. "Really?" she mused. "It's strange how much energy I wasted pretending to be something I wasn't. I could have used that energy to actually become it." I nodded, understanding completely. "How are the wedding plans coming?" I asked. "Slowly. Marcus wants something smaller than I originally planned. He says the marriage matters more than the wedding. He's probably right." "Wise man," I commented. "You chose well." Emily smiled genuinely. "I did, didn't I? Even if he did almost call off the engagement after meeting my family." We both laughed. The painful memory softened enough to be almost humorous. "Mom and Dad want us all to come to dinner next weekend," Emily said. "They're celebrating their anniversary." "I'll be there," I promised. "Oh, and Marcus mentioned he's appearing in your courtroom Tuesday." "The Westlake case," I confirmed, pleased she could mention it without tension. "Though, of course, I can't discuss it." "Of course not, Your Honor," she teased, without any trace of her former mockery. Later that week, I hosted a dinner of my own, a small gathering for women in the legal profession. I'd started organizing it monthly to mentor younger attorneys. Among them was Zoe, a shy second-year associate who was clearly brilliant but struggling to find her voice in a male-dominated firm. "Judge Donovan," she said quietly as the others mingled. "May I ask you something personal?" "Of course," I replied. "How did you become so confident, so sure of yourself?" I smiled, thinking of the journey over the past few months. I wasn't always. For years, I hid my achievements because I was afraid of how others would react. I let people underestimate me because it seemed easier than facing their jealousy or expectations. Her eyes widened. "Really? But you're so accomplished." "Accomplishments and confidence don't always go hand in hand," I explained. "I had to learn that hiding my light didn't serve anyone. Not me, not those who could benefit from my example, not even the people I was trying to protect by staying small." "What changed?" she asked. "I realized my worth isn't determined by others' perceptions," I said. By denying my success, I was reinforcing the idea that it was something to be ashamed of. Zoe nodded thoughtfully. "I struggle with that. Speaking up in meetings, taking credit for my work. I always worry I'll come across as arrogant." "There's a difference between confidence and arrogance," I told her. "Confidence is knowing your value. Arrogance is needing others to acknowledge it. When you're secure in yourself, you don't need to compare or compete." A lesson I wished I'd learned years earlier. One that might have spared Emily and me so much pain. The following Sunday, my parents' anniversary dinner brought the four of us together again. The tension that had defined our family gatherings for years had softened, replaced by a cautious warmth. We were beginning to see each other as we truly were, not the roles we'd assigned one another in our family drama. After dinner, as Dad and Marcus discussed a recent Supreme Court ruling, Emily approached me with 2 glasses of wine. "I wanted to tell you something," she said, handing me a glass. "What's that?" "I saw your name in the Bar Association Journal, the article about the Kingston ruling." The Kingston case had been challenging, a complex corporate fraud trial that took months of hearings and deliberation. My decision had been featured in legal publications for its thoroughness and clarity. "It was a difficult case," I acknowledged. "The article called you one of the most promising judicial minds of your generation," Emily continued. "And honestly, I'm not surprised. Even as kids, you always saw things differently, more clearly than everyone else." Coming from Emily, this simple acknowledgement meant more than all the professional accolades combined. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved. "I'm proud of you, Claire," she said, the words no longer seeming to cost her anything. "And I'm sorry it took me so long to say that." "Better late than never," I replied, clinking my glass against hers. Driving home that night, I reflected on the journey of the past few months. The revelation at Emily's engagement party had been painful, even traumatic, but necessary. Like lancing a wound, it released years of festering resentment and misunderstanding, allowing genuine healing to begin. I learned that hiding your light serves no one, not yourself, not those inspired by your example, not even those you're trying to protect by staying small. Family dynamics are complex and often built on misperceptions, with everyone carrying their own version of events. Most importantly, I realized it's never too late to rewrite the narrative of your relationships, to create something healthier and more authentic. The road ahead with Emily won't always be smooth. Old habits die hard, and we both built identities around our perceived roles. But we're trying, and that's more than we've done in most of our adult lives. As for me, I no longer feel the need to hide my achievements or downplay my success. Judge Claire Donovan is who I am, not my entire identity, but an important part I denied for too long. I'd spent years allowing myself to be underestimated, believing it was easier than facing others' expectations or jealousy. In reality, I was only limiting myself and reinforcing harmful patterns. The truth, when finally revealed, was painful, but ultimately liberating. If you've ever felt overlooked or underestimated by those closest to you, I want you to know you're not alone. For years, I hid my true self and achievements because I was afraid of how my family would react. I carried the weight of being underestimated and kept my success a secret, thinking it was easier than facing their expectations or jealousy. But the truth? Hiding who you are only holds you back from living your fullest life. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to prove your worth to people who should have supported you? How did you find the strength to stand tall? Your stories and advice mean the world to me and to everyone who's walked a similar path. Remember, your value isn't defined by others' opinions or comparisons. Confidence comes from knowing your own worth, not from competing or seeking approval. If you're struggling with family dynamics or self-doubt, start by being honest with yourself and those around you. It's never too late to rewrite your story and build healthier relationships. If my journey resonates with you, please leave a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe. Together, we can support each other through the challenges and celebrate the victories, because every one of us deserves to shine.